r/AskReddit. Driver's license testers, what's the worst thing a kid has done without batting an eye while taking the driving test? The kids make minor mistakes, and yes, some do make scary mistakes. However, it's the adults that scare me most, especially the seniors who are up for re-exam. Probably the worst test I've ever been on was this man in his 90s. I instructed him to turn onto a street when it is safe to do so, and he turned, narrowly missing a pedestrian. Not only that, but he was driving on the wrong side of the road. He came head to head with another car who pulled over to let him go. He was laughing about it because he was under the impression that it was a one-way road. When I got back to the office with him, I cut the test short and got him back in the quickest and safest way possible. He was astounded when I told him it was not a one-way street. Me, did you see any one-way signs? Him, no, but I assumed you were going to take me on one. Huh. Okay, 3 stories. My ex drove a Gia Tracker, tiny car. She pulled right into the parallel parking area and fit in so unbelievably easy. The tester made her do it properly. A girl in my driver's ed failed her test when she went to DMV because she turned into oncoming traffic. Not only was there a grass median, there were some of those skinny red/white poles for about 10 feet followed by a guardrail. Each side of the median was 3 lanes. There really was no way to miss it, but she did. On a lighter note, I did the backing up 100 feet. When the tester told me when, I stopped, and before I put it into park he asked me a few verbal questions, then proceeded to give me directions to leave the area and back to the parking lot where the parallel parking test would be done. Never put the car in drive, pressed the gas, and car went flying in reverse for about 20 feet. He apologized and said, "My fault for distracting you." As far as I'm concerned, that never happened. While driving my dad's truck, I stopped at a construction zone with a dude holding a stop sign. Since there was only one lane open, I looked in the rearview mirror and noticed this silver SUV coming in fast behind me. Watched as they didn't slow down at all, and I just mashed the brake hoping my vehicle wouldn't go flying into the construction guys. At the last fucking minute, the driver of the SUV saw what was about to happen and yanked the wheel toward the ditch. Their SUV clipped my dad's truck and flew by through the ditch, which was one of those highly graded, steep fuckers. Older lady got out and we were all fine. A cop came and both vehicles were driving, so we moved a bit up. My dad's truck had a busted taillight and some body damage, but it wasn't a huge deal, just needed a quick repair. Well, I get a call a few weeks later by a guy saying he's the husband of the woman who hit me and tried offering money instead of having it reported against their insurance. She was ticketed as well. I explained it wasn't my truck and my dad lived hours away, so it wasn't really my deal to sort out. That's why people have insurance. Dude just goes asshole mode and tells me that I've ruined his wife's life and now she won't be able to renew her license. How she won't be able to drive anymore. It was nuts. Like it was my fault I was stopped at road construction yielding to their stop sign. She could have easily ran guys over had she not saw my vehicle in her path. I was the kid, and full transparency, it was a learning drive, not the test. We had to do 6 scheduled drives with our instructor and had a partner. One would drive for 30 minutes, then you would stop and switch so the other could drive back. The rule when you got in the car, just so it wasn't a constant game of should I turn, was that you always go straight until the instructor tells you to turn. So one Saturday, we had a very early drive scheduled. We met up at the school and I was the first to drive. We got about 5 minutes in, turned onto a main road, and the instructor quickly fell asleep. My partner and I quietly, with a smirk, agreed that we would still follow the rules. We took the road for about an hour and 15 minutes until it dead-ended and you had to turn. I pulled over in a parking lot and we woke up the instructor to ask him which way to turn. It took a good 30 seconds for him to realize what had happened and where we were. He yelled at us both to get in the back seat and we witnessed some very unsafe ways to drive as we headed back towards the school. And I didn't bat an eye. Kinda the opposite of your question. Actually, the worst thing a tester could do. Gets in car, a little hatchback, Has a huge man and cannot fit. Says he will fail me unless I can get a car he could fit into within 15 minutes, otherwise my slot will be gone and I will have to rebook and pay again. Luckily dad was 5 minutes away who came with his sedan. Disaster averted, or so I thought. Asks me to do a U-turn on a farm road, single lane each side, with a ditch on either side. Impossible to do, based on turning circle of car. I attempted the largest angle possible, but due to ditch each side ends up being a 3-point turn. He asks me if I'm deaf, and if I know what a U-turn is. Politely try to explain it's not possible, which I'm sure he knew. Completed the test, and passed everything else. Failed me and told me to come back when I learn to drive. Rebooked the next day, and passed with a different instructor. This was in 2005. Fast forward 15 years, he is actually in the news and sentenced to jail for accepted bribes. In hindsight he made a comment of some sort of reparation for not fitting in the car, and it makes sense now. Not a tester, but there was a license center next to the sporting goods store I worked at. A lot of people would come there and practice before their test out front in the straight on parking spots. A young lady, who only had her permit, managed to mix up the gas and brake and drove right through the front of the license center. I was told later that she was even more upset when they wouldn't let her reschedule her test for the following day, since they cancelled her test she was pulling in to take when she wrecked the whole front of the building. It wasn't long after that they installed a bunch of bollards in front to protect the building. I was amazed at how marked up they had gotten in the first few months. I almost failed for failing to follow instruction type shit. For one instruction, which I followed, but not as fast as he wanted. The town we were driving through had a 2-lane roads, one going each way, which is part of a major 4-lane highway at high speeds. I turn onto the southbound into the right lane. I'm up to speed, and the instructor tells me we are gonna turn left and onto the other side at a stop sign / light linking road several miles away. So we've got a bit. The left lane is filled with speeding teens and semi-trucks. He yells at me, get in the left lane. There's a semi there, and a semi behind it. Get in the left lane. There's a jacked up truck there. They're nose to fucking tail and not paying attention. I'm signaling for a hot minute at this point. Not a single gap sized enough for my car. Get in the left lane. This shit continues almost the entire length of this road with him yelling at me. I tried to take a gap, but the dick behind sped up to take it. Finally one of the semis took a turn, and I got over before we could even see the intersection. I swear that fucking guy wanted any reason to fail me, even if he had to make the situation himself. I was already freaked from having to drive an unfamiliar car in a town I've never been through with a guy I've never met judging my every fucking blink and breath. I guess I sort of fit the criteria. Prior military and, after being certified for a long time in the Coast Guard as a truck and trailer driver for transporting small boats to boat launch ramps, I would take new guys out to practice driving with the trailer, working the hitch, basic maintenance, hand signals for spotters, making sure they don't jackknife the damn thing in reverse, and backing the boat / trailer up into a garage / boat ramp. Young kid just out of boot camp was with me for the day while we drove down to a ramp to offload boat and crew to work a few ranges, water lights, for the day. It was the kid's final sign off, and he was to take the empty trailer and boat back to base alone after I joined the crew on the water. He'd driven with me as passenger successfully many times by this point and had all his sign-offs done and was endorsed by command to be rewarded his driver letter. Cut to several hours later, and our boat is mooring up at the base pier, and no new guy and truck in sight. That's weird. So I call the kid, and try and find out where he was. Long story short, on the way home he stopped off at an ice rink to fuck around and have fun, but parked illegally in a handicapped spot. The government vehicle got towed, but instead of calling us, he got an Uber home, turned off his phone, and hid in his barracks room. Had to get command to negotiate with the city to get the truck out of impound, and the bean counters over at command. The federal auditors over with government vehicle procurement were not happy. He did not get his certification. not a tester, but I was in the backseat of the car when it happened. I had just taken my third and final driving test, passed it without a hitch, no problem. However, the driving route was just going to another kid's house to pick her up. Pretty standard. So as I pull up to the driveway, the driving instructor says, "Just be ready. She has never even sat in a driver's seat of a car before." I didn't think too much of it, because my first time driving was with the instructor. And it went well. Anyway, we get in and start driving off. Not even 45 seconds later we get to a stop sign. She doesn't stop, so the instructor slams on his brake in his foot. Well, she was confused as to why she was stopping, so she continued to press down on the accelerator harder, like to the floor. Lots of screaming telling her to stop. After about 15 seconds of that, she puts the car in park and blows the transmission. It was some 1980s Volvo and the car was pretty much junked. It's funny, as we were driving, my instructor was telling me how he was surprised this car was still going. Had about 295k miles on it. Story time. When I was 17 I lived in Ohio and went in for my driver's test to obtain my license. Where I lived, the state patrol officer was the one who rode along with you and administered the test. It was intimidating to have a state patrol officer riding along with you. I passed my test with only one minor mistake. The blunder part comes while I was waiting for them to print out my card. The office was very busy that day and definitely near capacity. Not a chair was empty. While I sat there, another kid came in from his test, his head hanging low. A patrol officer followed him in with a gruff look on his face. This officer had to be 6 feet 5 inches and a mountain of man. The boy walked over to his father and was explaining that he had failed his test. The father lost his mind and walked over to the officer. He then proceeded to put his finger in the officer's face and yell at him. At this point the entire room went silent and watched. "How dare you fail my son? He is a good driver. Turning left into a turn lane and merging into traffic is not illegal. It is in that part of Ohio BTW." The officer smirked and looked around, knowing everyone was watching this now. He then said loudly enough for the whole room to hear, "Sir, it is illegal, and I can show you where in the book it states that." He then pulled out the driving laws book and showed him. "But sir, that is not the reason I failed your son. He failed because he was doing 45 in a school zone." The entire room began to snicker. The father quickly grabbed his son and ran out. I remember my driver's test very clearly. First of all, I was a smart, overly arrogant little prick. I procrastinated and never got my learner's permit until I was like 4 months away from turning 16. This meant I could only get my license 2 months after turning 16 because you were required to have your permit for 6 months before you can get your license in my state. So anyway, finally waited out the 6 months and felt like I knew what I was doing. I had to take the test in my dad's Cadillac DeVille, an enormous boat of a car. Part of the test was a 3-point turn. I aced it, or so I thought. Also, part of the test was slamming on the brakes. I fucking aced that shit too, I thought. Then he asked me to stop at a stop sign. Boom. Simple. Then the test was pretty much over, and he asked me to park, and I pulled right into the spot. The tester spent what seemed like forever adding shit up on his sheet, and he was like, "Well, you passed. You can go in and get your license." Being the little prick I was like, was there anything I did wrong, fully expecting him to tell me how great a driver I was. He was like, "Well, at the beginning of the test, you started backing out of the spot before looking. You eventually did look, but you would have run over someone if they were standing directly behind your car. Once you pulled out of the parking lot, you hit the accelerator hard and had to correct your steering to stay in the lane fast enough that you would have lost control of the car if it was raining. Your 3-point turn was accomplished, but not done safely, since you were not looking both ways. Also, you pulled too far forward and too far backward, much more so than you needed. Your hands were on the wheel, but I was not confident you had a good grip on the wheel when it mattered most. You stopped at the stop sign, and you were behind the white line, but you failed to approach slowly after moving forward after the stop. Your right turns were close to cutting the curb. Your left turns were much too early. When you tested fast braking, you let go of the brake pedal and hit it again, which increased braking distance. You basically barely passed. I hope you become a better driver after this. I went from being a cocky little fuck to feeling like I was barely cutting it. Seriously, it made me put effort into driving. Total wake up call. I swear I'm a good driver today. Age 37. Partly because of him pointing out all the nuances I missed with my inexperience. Not a tester, but recently a buddy did this. I took a friend on the route that I had taken with that same DMV for my license, and the route that Misel had taken at same DMV. In return, my friend showed the buddy all 3 routes when he went for his license test, because all 3 of ours went through the park and were very similar, with one side street difference. He figured he was going through the park. So without the license tester saying anything, buddy pulls into park and goes through it, no blinker, and didn't drop his speed. Mind you, when you got on the main road the speed limit is 35, then drops to 25, such a busy road, and so many signs you barely notice the 25. But obviously when on way to DMV still stressed to me. I stressed to friend and friend, supposedly, stressed to buddy. Then when you enter park it's automatically 15, but it's a hill. Still 15, but much easier to go up it going faster. All in all, buddy failed because of his reverse. License tester didn't write anything about park, just laughed and said we were funny for taking him the routes we went. Especially since it was the same guy I did mine with. Not a tester, but was in the car when this happened. Where I learned it, all the kids went in pairs to drive. One kid would drive an hour away, then the students would switch roles and the other would drive back. All while the instructor helps and gives advice. I had finished my part of the driving and was sitting in the back trying not to get carsick. I had done this a couple times before with some other fellow classmates, but this one extraordinarily more bumpy than the others. We stop at a red light and the kid needs to turn left. So he turns on his signal, looks both ways, and begins his turn, while the light is still red, and there is barely a big enough gap in traffic to get through. The teacher stops him and asks what he's doing. He replies, if you're turning right and the light is red and no one is coming, you can turn. Isn't it the same for turning left? I'm not sure if B passed the class, but it was one of the most stressful drives in my life. Not a tester, but during my own test a while back I witnessed what is arguably the dumbest shit I have ever seen in my life. I was waiting to give my own driver's test when this magnificent interaction went down between a kid and the tester. The kid was visibly high and tripping his balls off. Everyone in the room and outside could tell he was not on this planet mentally. The tester asked him if he was feeling okay to give the test and he responded by staring at him with the biggest smile that made him the envy amongst the most depressed in the room. The tester, verbally, with a lot more enunciation, asked him if he had consumed any substance that would alter his state of mind and render him unable to operate a vehicle. Our boy 420 responded by giving him a hug and saying it's good to see you, Tarango. At this point it was clear to everyone with a functioning brain that this kite was flying too high and it would be dangerous to leave him unattended. Concerned for his safety, the tester requested that they call an ambulance. In the meantime, this little old lady from reception ushered this kid to a chair and offered him a cup of water, which he promptly offered to Rango. Rango did not take the water, so the kid left it on the floor for later. At this point, the remaining neurons in his brain conjured up what I would describe as the most bizarre and mind-bogglingly entertaining scenario I have ever been privy to. The kid convinced himself that he was now giving his driver's test and began with the most passionate effort in replicating the starting sound of what I think was a 1992 Honda Civic. The performance was accompanied by dialogue between him and Rango, gear changes which accurately matched the engine RPM, and I think he even slipped in a gear or two. The dialogue was incomprehensible owing to the fact that it was constantly accompanied by screeches, yells, honks and him constantly slapping his neck for some weird reason. I cannot do justice by putting in words the sheer authenticity of what he thinks was his driver's test and him arguing with an imaginary tester why he deserves his license. The paramedics came in and they took one look at him and simply said, "I'm getting the stretcher." Apparently XXX 420 Chadx was fucked up on some shrooms and what one paramedic said looked to be LSD on some sort of paper type thing. They said you eat it or leave it in your mouth. Apparently he wasn't even scheduled for a driver's test and stumbled in and just stood up when a name was called. My dad's a driver's ed teacher. Every week when we go eat lunch he always has a story about how he almost died the previous week. Most of them involve the kids not knowing their left from their right, which is kind of understandable if you've never driven before and are nervous. But he says most of the time it's kids trying to multitask, changing the radio, or grabbing their phone. After a few months and a couple of near misses he makes the student driver hand him their phone and only he can mess with the radio. Some of this stories the kids aren't even the problems. It's other drivers. The car had 4 giant magnetic stickers that say student driver in black and yellow font on the front, back, and sides a silver Chevy Impala. Other drivers will get close and try to intimidate the kids by honking, revving up, or bass boosting their music. I've been driving for 18 years and I know that still fucks with me. God knows how the kids feel. In the first half of this year he did have this terrible student driver story. The girl would just freeze up at random. He said this went on for 2 weeks before he had to just fail her out of the course. One time she popped a curb because there was a squirrel in the road. Then there was the time she almost ran a red light plowed right into a smart car. And my favorite, she forgot which pedal was the brake and which one was the gas. He said they sat there in the parking lot of the school for 10 minutes so she could remember. Damn, this thread feels like a personal attack. Obligatory disclosure that I'm not the person who scores test takers, but I took the driving test last year. I get in the car, watch the dude go through all of my documents, and wait for him to finish writing, and then he says, "Okay, start the car. This is my moment, and I'm going to shine." So I start the car and put the car in reverse, look at my rear view mirror and turn my head and try to pull out, but the car does not move the way it's supposed to. It seems impossible, but maybe it's slightly rolling backwards? Okay, weird. My foot is on the brake. I try again, and my instructor tells me to start the car, and I'm just like, but whatever. I make a show out of starting the car again, even though it's already started, and do the exact same steps, but bam, I'm not moving. He says, "Ma'am, you need to start the car." And now I'm just thinking, what a fucking idiot. The car is started, the radio is playing, I don't know what else I can do. I again move the key angrily this time and then bam, I turn the key all the way and I hear the engine come to life. I'm deeply ashamed. My driving instructor is watching me and appalled, and my test taker let me go around the block as a courtesy. Now I stay home and thus do not need a license because I'm never showing my face in public again. I went to school with a girl who continuously failed her practice tests in driver's ed by an astronomical amount of points, over 70 once, and then continued to fail the actual tests multiple times. She finally passed by the skin of her teeth. When I asked her what she was doing wrong, she didn't know. Then she got a car. Within a week or two she totaled her car. Very shortly thereafter, I think less than a month, she totaled her mom's car. She flipped the car several times and was lucky to walk away without horrible injuries. She's even luckier she didn't kill someone. She was so mad that her mom wouldn't let her drive her next car or co-sign for her to get another car. I really wish people would stop treating driving like a right everyone should be entitled to. Editing to add that my own brother was told he was going to pass, and then on the way back to the DMV failed for road rage because someone cut him off. He walked back into the DMV yelling, "Mom, I failed but they almost hit your fucking Prius." Story from Pennsylvania. We have lots of tractor trailers on the roads here. Lots. Arguably too many, and they can often be terrifying to drive around. Anyways, we could take our license test through the high school and the teacher often let us ride along on each other's tests. to see how it goes. I was in the backseat as the student testing pulls onto the interstate at 35 miles per hour. A tractor trailer comes barreling downhill on us and lays into his horn, and the teacher starts telling the kid to move with the flow of traffic aka speed up. He starts going 45 miles per hour and is clearly super nervous. We are going one exit on I-83. It's only 2 lanes each way and no shoulder, as the highway is sandwiched between a large hill and a lake. I don't know how many tractor trailers went screaming by us in those 2 to 4 miles. But they kept honking and swerving to avoid us. The instructor is shouting and cursing at the kids to speed up. I thought we were gonna die. I'm surprised none of them jackknifed or tipped over, to be honest. All of these happened in Australia. One of the tests I sat in on during my training was a young lady who was on her 2nd or 3rd try. We made it to the end of the driveway and were ready to turn right. She took the turn way too sharp/early and ended up driving on the wrong side of the road for about 40 meters before we could get her back on the correct side of the road, as we were running parallel to a massive traffic island. Some stroke of luck/miracle meant at the time there was no oncoming traffic. Another girl drove all the way down our 80-meter driveway with the handbrake still engaged. The examiner stopped her when the burning smell hit and asked her if there were any warning lights on her dashboard or if she needed to adjust any of her controls or instruments. She said no and kept driving to the end of the driveway before he told her to stop. I was in an assessment recently and the girl was instructed to turn left at the traffic lights ahead. She decided not to stop at the clearly visible red light, and I had to use the handbrake to stop her. I asked her if she had control of the foot brake and she did. I then explained the red light was for us. She then proceeded to try and run the light again, almost immediately. Good times. Thank you so much for watching the whole video. Please leave a like and subscribe.